think the baseline of true connection starts with radical acceptance of what is. Every stage of grief has been holy to me, but I didn't grow up learning that. I didn't know that. I grew up with a religious idea that there were good emotions and bad emotions, and trying to avoid the bad ones was really, it was a full-time job. The bad ones, there's no such thing as a bad emotion. It's information, and it's telling us something very important about our existence and about what matters to us. And often grief is proof of love. Disappointment is often proof of hope. You know, we hoped in something. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, and a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. It's risky to hope. And to feel disappointment is human. It's vulnerable. Oh man, and that's just so hard. Disappointment is so hard for me. But I make myself suffer more when I try to keep it at bay, when I actually try to stave it off. Just the other day, I was talking with one of my best friends, and she was talking about just doing today. What if we just do today? Today, you're sad and you want to quit. And tomorrow might be different. But what if you pull yourself into the present moment and you let yourself be exactly there? That is, all those moments are when I have run into God the most, is when I am able to return to the baseline of, I'm actually really disappointed today. I'm really disappointed in you today. Being able to have that kind of honesty as the starter. I always feel like, okay, that's the gateway to God. That's the gateway of gratitude, the gateway of grief. I mean, they're hand in hand when it comes to the divine. And we want so badly to get to the result, to produce something. I don't want it to be wasted. I think that's always been the most anxious thought for me when it comes to grief, is that grief has its own timeline. You can't organize yourself in 60 days, I'll be done with this. That's not how it works. You have to really yield time. It's the hardest thing for me to yield. It has its own grip. There's a phrase that when I was going through an immense season of grief, I was basically learning how to grieve. It was the starting, like I said, I'm a beginner. But it was the starting place of grief for me, and I had a catalyst of it, a human event that threw me into the deep end of finding God through grief. It was out past all of the things that were neatly organized that gave me a semblance, a sense of being able to manage or control. It was all out past all of those things. Finding God in anger, finding God in sadness, in depression, in the nights when I didn't want to be here anymore. I mean, I had no energy to go out looking for God at that point. That's when I think we find out that we're held this whole time. That's when I found out that the fabric of faith has nothing to do with my mental fortitude of being able to believe enough good things to somehow prop myself up for another day. It's when I had no energy to go looking for God that I found God everywhere, and could feel it kind of in a molecular way when we're helpless, when we return to our helpless state and we yield, we slacken and we find out who's been holding us, right? There's all these stances that we have as far as approaching our life, and I think we really celebrate the front foot, which I love, but there's also the leaning back and finding out what we trust, you know? But I was reading recently Mark 4 verse 40, and in the Passion Translation, it's the story of Jesus and the boys in the boat, and a storm whips up and everybody's freaking out, and this is such a paraphrase, and our guy Jesus is asleep in the boat, and when he wakes up, I love the Passion Translation for this. He says, "Why are you so afraid? Haven't you learned to trust yet?" The phrase, the way through fear is trust, kind of became a sentence, an anchoring sentence for me. I was able to look back on things that I was so afraid of, things that I still am afraid of. The way through fear is trust. Often I feel like instead of being delivered from fears, I've been delivered straight to all my fears, or they've been delivered to me on a silver platter. The only way to say that God delivered me from something is if I went through it with him. as if I knew who I was trusting through it. I can't bypass it. I can't spiritually bypass grief. I can't circumvent my sadness. And that's what I find myself doing a lot often, is in my mind, there's still that trick that's, if I could just find reason, then I won't have to feel the feeling. I won't have to feel the sadness, because I can just, it'll make sense to me. That only goes so far. I have to yield and settle into the actual honesty of the moment, which introduces, that's the gateway. There's so much transformation that's all wrapped up within that. And we don't get to resurrection without death. There's no circumventing that either. And I think our survival minds really love to latch onto the idea that Jesus died so we don't have to. I think he showed us how to. He absorbed the violence of mankind for us, absolutely. And he also led us, he showed us how to love unto death and how to trust all the way through.